it's easier just to stay comfortable rather than to begin to question, which we're always, particularly Catholicism, a lot of times very reticent to question anything.
Mm.
It's like we tend to be, that kind of way. But if you don't ask those questions, your faith stays back as an 8-year-old.
Mhm.
And when you get to be 70, it's not going to mean a whole lot to you.
Mm. It's so interesting, to think of it that way. And I think, for a lot of people, and I say this with full respect, and hopefully you understand what I mean by
Mm,
this. Part of the reason they embody that view of religion is because even God in general is they need comfort in their life. The world is
yeah,
so complex and they're so infinite, and there's something about that comfort of something simple to believe. Again, no disrespect, that there's a person in the sky who's kind of driving and dictating this thing. That's the whole reason they subscribe to religion to begin with. So to move away from that is almost like it defeats the whole purpose of it. Now, I'm saying there's some people that probably
yeah,
think that. I'm not saying everybody views it that way by
right,
any means.
right, right.
And I'm not even necessarily judging those people. I get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but it's interesting because you're bringing it more to, it's not, there's not necessarily, there's a comfort in it, but there's certainty in it, but there's not the certainty you would normally expect from religion, which is, oh, these are the answers of what the world is.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
that's a really interesting take on it.
exactly. And you can look at, for example, look at the Beatitudes the way they're recorded in the Gospels. If you can read the Beatitudes and not feel challenged by those, you're not reading them correctly,
Mm,
because they're meant to be a challenge. They're not meant to be, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm okay with that. And there's lots of other examples where that kind of thing is just, in the words of Jesus, just thrown out of, it's not, that's not right.
mm.
You have to be challenged by what you read, by what you practice, and to the point of, sometimes where you could say, Jesus, is this real, and not be afraid to ask that question.
Is that
you
not
know
offensive to God though? Sometimes is that,
no,
because that's the view a lot.
i
I
don't
think some
think
people think, right?
I don't think it is. I
I wouldn't
mean,
think so either,
it's
but
like, you talk to people and they say, you know geez, I'm really angry that this happened, and I'm really angry at God. And then they feel guilty. Then I feel guilty
mm,
about it. And how should I do that? And my response usually is, God's big enough; He can take it. Don't be afraid to be angry. I've done it. You know, I, I get upset
yeah.
about things, and it's like, what the heck are you doing to me here? What's going on? And that's not a bad thing. Is
Mm.
what I'm trying to say. That's not bad. It's something you need to do to be an integrated person, I suppose, is a good way to say it too.
Yeah, I would even go as far to say, and I think this is where you're going with it, for you to actually believe the faith that you believe in, to actually believe it, you have to go through that process. If
Yeah,
you
I
haven't,
think so.
then you can't truly believe it. You just can't. You can't know for sure. Maybe let me put it
Yeah,
that way. It's
yeah,
tough
yeah.
to know for sure that you feel that good about it. And I think maybe to your point, that's a scary thing for a lot of people. Maybe some
It
people
is,
are worried that you go through that questioning, and where do I end up?
right, and
And
it's
that can be scary.
sometimes it works out. You come right back around to the same circle
Sounds
again,
like in your case,
which
right?
which is what happened with me.
Yeah.
Of where is it?
What's making me think too is, and this may be the abstract idea, but I've been playing around with this phrase in my head somewhat, because as you might imagine, I think about this stuff a lot.
Sure.
Um, that you get the God that you choose. And again, I say all this without any disrespect. This is just us kind of, I think, in the spirit that God would want, as you were just talking about. I think God would be okay with us exploring these types of things. So what I mean by that is that you get the God you choose. It kind of goes back to what you were saying before about we hear what we're meant to hear. The way you're explaining faith and religion and all this, it's almost as if you try and boil it down to its very essence of what does it mean to really question myself in life and try and live in accordance of what I think is most important. What is the best way to live? What are the key virtues that matter most? Like that's what it is, right?
All right.
And for each individual person, they may not call it religion, they may not call it God, because they think of it as God has to be follow exactly what's in this book. In some ways, that's what most people are doing. They're making some
Yeah.
determination about what's most important in life, and then they get the God, quote unquote, they get the world that they choose, because then that's how they live, and that's the framework that they do everything. And by that explanation, I feel as if I might be as religious as you are. and I just use a different word to explain it. And
Sure.
again, these are things that we hear all the time. It's kind of cliche, but to hear it in long form like this, it makes more sense to me than it normally would when I think about it. Is that kind of where
Right.
your head's at
Yeah,
on it?
yeah, because you know, I, I'm not sure about the phrase. To be honest, the phrase of "you get the God that you,"
Yeah, that's kind of a
you
kitschy
know,
little thing. Yeah, throw that out.
it's not quite what I would say, but
Yeah.
um, I think that God is certainly big enough to be able to encompass all of that, no matter where it's coming from. You know, we tend to have. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but we tend to have this vision of who and what God is, and I think the minute we begin to think that we know what God is when God says, "Ha ha ha! I got you." You know, and now I'm going to really show you. You know,
Yeah.
now put this in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah.
But you know, I think we make that mistake too.
Yeah.
I mean, we try to define who God is.
And I
I
get
can't
it. I
define.
understand why we want to understand who
I mean,
God
yeah,
is and what
sure,
he,
it's
but we just
easier,
have to accept we can't.
right? You
Yeah.
can't. And somebody, you know, how would you describe God? I can't.
No idea.
I can describe what I think, but is that what God really is?
That's interesting. Is there
I don't know.
anything, because I've often wondered this, and the way you're explaining that is a preemptive answer, but let's assume there is a God. How do we know that God is well intentioned? How do we know that God is competent? Right. And in some ways, those are blasphemous things to say. And I get that. So again, I'm
No,
saying
that's
them in that open, but in your spirit, what you're saying we can never know those answers. So, but how do we know then? Like maybe there is a God out there, but is there implicit in your faith that that God is a good God, that
oh,
God wants what's best for us?
yes.
What's the source of that belief? How do you know that?